we go. Hi, Leo Rodriguez, software developer. Let's have the topic of aggressive names for efficient user story disambiguation. How you name your user stories is important. How you name your user stories may make you, your team, or anybody involved in the product backlog more or less efficient. How do you find the best user story title? We'll get to that in a moment. It's important to notice that in a pure sense, user stories don't have titles. They're just a few sentences that describe something that a user does in a system. The problem is that with the hundreds or thousands of user stories and backlog items that we need to manage every day, we use some form of electronic backlog management system. And those types of things use titles or short descriptions, mainly because they use lists. We humans use some form of presentation of data. Many times we use lists. And let's face it, having long type of sentences in the list format just becomes a bunch of characters that start to make no sense. For the human eye, a lot of times less is more, especially when it comes to words. And especially if you start using the traditional user story format in your title, you have a bunch of backlog items one after the next that all sound like, as a user, I would like to do. By the time you get to that 10th word, your brain would have liked to have grasped the meaning already of whatever it is that you're reading. Anyways, there's many reasons for that. I think we can all agree that typically a short title or description for a list is better. So lists need titles. There are three ways that typically we use titles in lists, and there are two incorrect or less efficient ways, and one that is more of a sweet spot, and that's what we're going to get to and how to find that sweet spot. Okay. First, let's talk about long names. You either put the entire user story description in the title, a full sentence, paragraph, something very long. Typically it's non-readable, non-scannable quickly with your eye. You can't get a grasp of what the story is with a few words, and make a decision on whether or not you want to drill into that and take a look at the description, bring it into a sprint. If it's too long, you can't get that grasp really fast. The other way is to use very short names. They go to the complete opposite of the spectrum versus using a full description in the title. Shorter is the way that you want to go. However, you need a certain way of getting there. And too short may be also not desirable. Here's a problem with very short names. If you have single words, it can be either a verb or a noun. Single words won't tell you much. And generally, phrases that do not infer any action, those become more problematic. So for example, if you have a user story titles that go like purchase orders, what does that mean? Checking account. What does that mean? What about checking accounts? What is the user doing with checking accounts? Which user? The teller or the bank customer? Right? So just checking account tells you nothing. People portfolio. What about people portfolio? Right? Then you can add a little bit to it and say, get a little smarter and make the mistake, I would say, to get a verb and use its noun counterpart and append it to the name. So taking the example of people portfolio, for example, we say people portfolio analysis. Well, that gives you a little bit more information. You're going to analyze a portfolio, right? Something like that. Um, but that still doesn't quite describe something more strongly. It's still very ambiguous. Um, Something like that would fall into the category of a category. Be a user story category, or if you're using TFS, they have areas. So you can have an area of your system that is a people portfolio analysis area. And underneath, you have a bunch of user stories underneath that people portfolio analysis that are your user story pertaining to analyzing portfolios, right? So short names like that, still ambiguous. Now let's talk about the sweet spot. Uh, Typically, we use an action and a noun in the title, all right? Do something. It's quite simple if you think about it. It makes sense. Action, noun, do something. The user is going to be doing something in the system, right? Makes sense. And somehow we managed to make it more complicated. But it is quite that simple. There's many benefits of using actions in your titles or sentences. They're more assertive. They call for you as a developer or participant in the project to do something. It describes something that the system will do or allow the user to do within the system. It just enhances everybody's understanding a little bit without further need for discussion up until a certain level. So you can make quick decisions like bringing a story to the backlog, or the action will trigger your memory of what the story means without you having to read the full description, for example. So do something. Action now combination. That comes from the naming conventions of use cases, which are very powerful. That's what use cases describe. Something that the system allows the user to do. So you always do something. Action now combination. And so there's two ways to do this. Go about figuring out your action now combination. The first one is you can start with a short name. Typically when you get more used to doing this, about 80% of the times you will be able to just figure out what your action noun is. And then you can just go from there. So having things like create new account, complete transaction, mark email as deleted, and so on. You have action nouns. You may add some qualifiers to it, depending on the scope of your project or the story. For example, the mark email as deleted, right? That's, you have to agree that that's way better than just the email story, right? What does email mean? So you specifically say mark email as deleted. Next, even if you are used to it, it may be necessary to go with the full user story description. And then with that, it becomes very, very easy to extract what your title should be, because the title is in the user story description. It's quite simple, actually. And yet a lot of times we sometimes have the description and then use a single noun as the user story title. So you go ahead and you describe your user story using the typical templates and what you typically use as a user type. I would like to do such and such thing so that I can achieve such and such goal within my scope or project. And in that sentence, you will see the main action and the main noun in that sentence. So for example, taking the people portfolio analysis example that we had above, which is not very desirable, let's discuss what this story should mean, right? So I'm in the context of a bank or a financial institution. My user is a mortgage processor. So the story would go something like this. As a mortgage processor, I need to view customer portfolios so that again, As a mortgage processor, I need to view a customer's portfolio so that I can analyze it and make a lending decision, right? So it's right there in front of you. Again, we thought that analyzing something would be one of the main actions. Here in this context, the system is not analyzing anything for me. It could, but it's not what it's doing. Who is analyzing is the user is analyzing something that is in front of him on the screen, or perhaps on a piece of paper later when you do the print customer portfolio story. But analyzing has nothing to do with the story. The user is actually viewing the portfolio, right? So as a mortgage processor, I need to view customer portfolio so that I can analyze it and make a lending decision. My title is View Customer Portfolio, right? Quite simple. And then you can choose to add qualifiers to it. It's only 3 words. You can go 5, 6 words. You can say mortgage processor views customer portfolio. You can do that, right? Then it depends on you. But the bottom line is the smallest unit is 2 words. It's an action verb noun. An action noun combination, right? So you want to have active phrases. That's pretty much it. To sum it up, we need to be a little bit more aggressive in the written title communication. We need to use active action noun phrases that indicate some action. And starting with the full description of the user story will give you in a platter the title of your story. I hope this helps, and any comments are welcome. Thank you.